Well, welcome everyone to this week's Menlo Midweek podcast. Before we jump into our episode with Brett, we got something so fun coming up. So we have Tim Wong here with us.
Hello, everyone.
And Tim, why are we so excited and what can people be looking forward to?
Man, I'm excited to share with you that we have this great event that's coming up at Shoreline Park for everyone here at Menlo Church and your neighbors and your friends. Bring them all to come out. Yeah, it's For the Bay 5K.
Okay.
Yeah, so as the name sounds like, it's a 5K race.
Yes.
Or run or walk or whatever you like to do. And the whole event is to really benefit one of our ministry partners called Mobilize Love.
Yeah.
And in case you're wondering, like, what is Mobilize Love?
Yeah, tell me more. Who is Mobilize Love?
Mobilize Love started in San Francisco by Christian Wong, who is also just happens to be a chaplain for the San Francisco Giants. So any Giants fans out there?
Yeah.
But he had this really huge passion for poverty, homelessness. And so he realized that instead of having people come to the ministry is going to come to the people.
Cool.
Yeah, so this is a fleet of trucks Mobilize Love has that addresses human needs. They address youth development, especially after-school programs for under-resourced youth. And so we're partnering with them to help them raise support and so that they can continue to do the great work that they're doing. And they're expanding to not only San Francisco now, but to serve the entire Bay Area.
Dude, that's so cool. And We've done a few races and stuff in the past online. Yes. You can kind of remember last year I'm a little scarred and still sore from all the running that we've done together. How does running in this 5K, how does that support Mobilize Love? And who else is involved that's also providing support for them? Yeah,
so just by signing up, if you're a runner, great. Sign up. Any proceeds that we raise will go towards Mobilize Love.
Okay, cool.
What's more important that if you can't run or you don't want to run, you can volunteer.
Yeah.
You can. We have a number of volunteer opportunities for you to serve because we're going to have like kids games, we're going to have food, we're going to have carnival stuff. It's going to be fun. And then even if you can't make it, you can donate online. So all sorts of great ways to help support this amazing ministry to help them reach their goals. Every $16,000 helps really address the needs for 40 to 50 kids and supplies after-school support for one semester.
Wow.
So our lofty, crazy goal is trying to raise $150,000 to help them reach their needs.
Let's do it.
Yeah, and you asked the other partners that we're having at this event. Great news, Sports Basement is one of our partners.
Whoa.
So anyone who signs up to race, you're going to get a 20% discount to be used at any of their stores, so look out for that.
That's gold right there. Okay.
And there's going to be little prizes here and there and all that stuff from them and other partners. And we also have another, a group of ministry partners, City Team from San Jose, Able Works, Hope Horizon from East Palo Alto, as well as Bay Area Medical Missions. And those are all our ministry partners, all helping serve under-resourced youth in our Bay Area.
Dude, that's incredible. As you're talking about this, I'm envisioning people in shirts. I'm envisioning like a full-on race. Is that what is actually going to happen? Do we need people to sign up so we can start ordering some of this stuff?
Absolutely, we do.
Okay.
So we're doing it all in one location at Shoreline Park. So it's an all-day event. It could be all day, but it's really from 9 to noon. Everyone can come out, and I think I forgot to mention we also have a 1K. So the 1K is like for anyone of any ability, all ages. Should be a lot of fun. So go onto our website and find out more information.
That'd be so cool. Okay. Sounds great. So what I'm hearing is that we have a 5K that's coming up for a really great cause. And by signing up early, we'll be able to track some stuff better, order some things. So
that's right.
So if people can sign up earlier rather than later, that'd be super helpful for us. And even if you can't run, there's still space for you to either volunteer or cheer people on.
Absolutely. Just come out. It's going to be a fun event. We've already checked out the area. Shoreline Park, bring your bike afterwards. Bring out a lawn chair. There'll be games for us to play. And again, just a great time to be together.
Cool.
Yeah.
I need to check with Missy first, but I would love if people are listening to this and want to meet baby Micah, we might walk the 1K together.
Woo,
That would be a cool thing.
Awesome.
So maybe we'll do that as long as I got permission from Missy.
Right.
We can do that. So everything sounds exciting, Tim. Thanks so much. Where can we hear more information? Where can we sign up?
Yeah, just go to menlo.church/for-the-bay-5K.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's right there.
Yeah, menlo.church/for-the-bay-5K.
All right.
And
Thanks,
you can
Tim.
find all your information there.
Thanks
Thank you
so much.
All right. We hope to see you at the starting line.
Yeah, let's do it. Well, welcome everyone to this week's Menlo Midweek podcast. My name is Mark.
And my name's Brett.
And we have Brett with us. Brett Koerten, our Central Director of Next Gen Things.
Next Gen Things. That's me.
Awesome.
Yep.
And resident triathlete and swimming expert.
I don't know if could I say I'm a triathlete. It's been like
You've done a triathlon.
I have done one.
Yeah,
and
that
it's been
counts.
a while.
That
yeah,
counts.
But I ran I took my dog on a run this morning and
Yeah.
we go about a mile and
Yeah.
I'm like, okay, I'm good. So
Yep, that's kind of where I'm at too. Except we have the little For the Bay 5K coming up.
Yeah,
too.
I know. That's why I ran the mile.
Did you?
Yeah. I gotta get ready for that.
If you couldn't guess, Brett is a very highly competitive person, and so
Just a little bit.
Doesn't surprise me at all that we have a For the Bay fun 5K, but we're already starting training for it.
It's coming. It's coming.
It is coming.
Yeah. Pressure's on.
Yeah.
It's like, do you remember when we used to have the competition as a staff of leading up to Run for Hope and who ran the most? And
I do.
I could not chill on that. Like,
No, you could not. It was
Yeah.
really hard to try to see you tuck away your competitiveness, but it wouldn't really work.
Yep.
Well, I'm grateful for you, Brett. Thank you so much for just a wonderful closing out of this spiritual formation series that we're in called The Formation Machine. Before we jump into this weekend, remind people of who you are, the work that you get to do here, who's on your team, and how that impacts the next generation.
Excellent. Yeah. So I'm the Next Gen Director, which means that I oversee all of our ministries for our campuses from birth through graduation in high school.
So that's pretty big.
So it's a big group.
Yeah.
On my team, we have Missy, Mark's wonderful wife.
Yeah, she's great.
She oversees all of our curriculum and environment and helping make sure that all of our campuses have kind of what they need and that we're teaching what we're hoping our students become. Phil mentioned in his sermon last week that the kingdom qualities, the 4 things that we think about, like we're thinking about that in all of our ministries. And so Missy is a part of helping lead that too through our curriculum. And then we have Joan Parker, who, Joan is awesome as well. She oversees all of our family connections and our events. And so kids and student ministries, we're doing events all the time. And so Joan is really the all-star who's leading all of those things forward. And then in extension, we have all of our kids and student directors.
Right.
And the Next Gen Ministry, it's an incredible team that I get to be a part of. And then I mentioned them, but then it's like we have the volunteers. Like I think there are, I don't know the total number off the top of my head, but I wouldn't be surprised if we have 400 kids and student volunteers across all our campuses.
It's incredible.
At least, yeah. And so the volunteers are incredible.
Wow. And I think that qualifies you to really wrap up our talk because we're talking about how the church as a community is countercultural. We've been talking about in this Formation Machine series how we're always being formed and shaped into something. And if we're not attentive to what that is, we're easily pulled away from being formed to be like Jesus and more formed to be like something else. And so I'd love for you to run us through your talk and start with the analogy of the little whirlpool because I thought that was really fun. Yeah.
Yeah, man, I'll tell you, honestly, I had to. You oftentimes ask, like, is there anything you cut? I did have a different beginning.
Oh, really? What was it?
And then, well, I'm not going to share it now, but it's because Phil told a story last week that is like, I felt like where I was going to take it was almost the exact same story because he talked about before being here, being in Colorado and it being cold, and I was going to talk about being in Wisconsin and it being cold. And then Phil sent me his talk. I was like, well, shoot.
Well, all right.
But it was good because I feel like the whirlpool was much better than where I was going with the
and
other
it's a little
one.
bit more you.
Yes. This whole series has been talking about how we are constantly being formed by our culture. And so I use the illustration of a whirlpool, how imagine most of us did this as a kid or something, where you get in a pool and all your friends, you're just making this big circle, and then all of a sudden the water starts pulling you. And that maybe, I think in culture, we might think, hey, this whirlpool is fun at first, and then you just keep going and you get sucked in. But then said that there's typically a time where people say, let's reverse it, and you have to like fight against the water and kind of try to reverse the flow, and that it takes some work, it takes some effort, but it can happen. And how really as a church, we are meant to be that kind of force to the world, where we have this formation that's happening in the world around us, but the church is a community of people who are living and supporting one another, caring for one another, walking with Jesus with one another. And that like when Jesus sent the church out into the world, it's like, you guys are going to be the people who are representing me to our world. And so when we think about the formation of our culture, the counter-formation solution is the church being the church. And so that's kind of where the talk goes.
Yeah. And so I love that in all of your talks, if you don't know this about Brett, he is a reader. And he reads a lot and speed reads a lot. And so you quoted people like John Tyson, like Rich Villodas. What other voices were kind of swirling around in your head as you were thinking about formation? Because what I think is interesting is that even though I grew up in the church, I didn't really hear the term spiritual formation until I really got to Menlo. It's kind of saying this idea of like the more that you try to become like Jesus. But I think that in terms of like actually the language of spiritual formation, there's a lot of different voices that we can hear that are like the pillars of this, but also there's a lot of people that are saying things that are deeply formative, but maybe just not in that same exact language.
Yeah. I honestly don't know if I would have used spiritual formation before coming to Menlo, even though that's what it is.
Right.
I oftentimes think about just discipleship is formation. Dallas Willard would, I know it's like coming to Menlo, you hear about Dallas Willard. Yeah. Dallas Willard would sometimes talk about it, if I'm even getting this correct, I hope I am, it's not becoming more like Jesus, it's becoming more of the person Jesus created you to be.
Dang.
And what he says, what he means by that is we already had a Jesus. We aren't trying to be Jesus, but God has created each one of us uniquely, and our job or our journey of discipleship is asking God, who is it that you have created me to be? And how do I become more of who you created me to be, the full me, as your spirit begins to work in my life? And so, meaning like, you have gifts, I have gifts, I have passions, you have passions, and God has given those to us for a reason. And we get to actually then ask God, where is it that you are calling me to be today? And that kind of led into the final take home from the talk, which was, where has God put you in this season? Kind of thinking about that of a way that you get to practice being formed into who it is that you're created to be is by actually living out who God has created you to be, where he's put you, where you are.
And before I want to dive into the how-tos, which are great, what I love about that is, can you talk a little bit more about how the church as a community can help guide a person personally to who God is calling them to be?
No, that's a great question. And church is a word that has so many different meanings depending on who you talk to.
It can be almost loaded in a way.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, and it's like, it's the place that you go to, it's the service that you sit through, it's the people who are telling you what to believe. Like, sure. But like, when I think about the church, I think about it as being the followers of Jesus who meet together regularly and consistently to learn about life with Jesus and to put those things in practice. And so when I'm talking about church and how I think church fits into our own spiritual formation is really like, let's say, just Sunday going to church. Like, that's kind of, oftentimes people think church is that thing you go to on Sunday mornings.
Church is 10 o'clock at this location for an hour.
For an hour. You get your donuts, you get your coffee, then peace out. It's hard to be formed by something when you just kind of view it as, I'm going to go watch it and then I'm going to go back to my everyday life. But when the church becomes the church, the counter-formational thing, it's like when you're actually investing in relationships and when you're practicing serving. And I mentioned in the talk of how the different aspects of, or the different parts of a worship service. Like when we sing songs to God, it's about glorifying God. And so when you're practicing glorifying God on Sundays, you're reminding yourself of who that God is. And then when you're going to work the next day, hopefully it's a reminder of like, hey, remember who that God is. Now today when you're at work, that God is still God. And so how do you get to approach this space as an extension of who that God has called you to be? And when we tithe or when we give, we're practicing trusting God with all that we have and that he is in control. I think about all of our volunteers, like I mentioned with kids and students. One of the coolest parts of my job is I get to see them like become the people they are created to be. Like when you get to see their gifts shine as they're discipling the next generation and they're helping them understand what life with Jesus looks like. And so all of these things are forming us in certain ways, which I think they're forming us to become more like who it is that God has created us to be. And so that's how I think the church fits into this formation process.
Yep. And so what I hear about that is church is more so a relational thing where we can come into contact with other people, and it's outside of just one spot on a Sunday. And so I loved how you closed with some examples of places in which people could actually live out their formation. And so talk a little bit more about formation, how that can happen outside of Sundays, and opportunities for us to take who we are, who we're being formed into, and being able to share that.
Yeah, I think, how do I want to start this? I think...
I know, formation is such like a big thing.
It is such a big thing. It's like, okay, where do you go with this?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, just to speak to like Sunday morning church is an awesome thing.
Absolutely.
But like you're saying, it's not it.
It's not just the primary
place. And so that's where I think it is so important to be connected with Christian community, especially from your church. And like, that's why honestly, why we have donuts and coffee and all that is like, we're creating a space for you to get to know people that hopefully either you're in a life group with them or else you get to just do life with people. I know some parents who kind of have like a pray and play group at a school. And so all their kids go to the same school. And so they will meet together and they will pray for their school and pray for each other. And it's just like this cool way of the church taking like what's happening on Sunday and bringing it into their everyday life. But thinking about what can they do during the week? I mean, there are always ways that you can serve that will help connect people. We have, obviously at the church, we have different things like life groups, or we have different events, like I mentioned, the parenting event and the talk. And they're kind of just ways to bring Jesus front and center in our lives every single day. A story that I kind of left out of this week's talk was when I was talking about where do you go. It was kind of a moment where I realized it for myself. And it had nothing to do with me. It was somebody else. I was in college, and I mentioned in a talk that I swam. And I try not to talk about that too much.
You say that casually.
Students are like sick of me talking about it. And so I'm like, I need to not talk about it. But I went to school, Madison, Wisconsin, greatest school ever on Wisconsin.
Debatable.
And okay. But I got started and, I was like this Christian kid who's like, I'm going to be involved with absolutely everything. And that's what God's calling me to do is to be involved in 7 different ministries, to be on a swim team, to also be in school and to be friends with people too. And so I have unlimited time. And I was going to start serving specifically with a ministry that I'd been a part of in high school. And I was going through the process and the person who was in charge of that ministry actually told me, like, rejected me from leading, and because they said, you don't have time for this. And I was not happy with them. It's like, how dare you tell me that? And then I was talking to a mentor of mine, a guy named Scott from Athletes in Action, and he kind of reframed everything for me. And he said, hey, I know you want to do that, but have you ever thought about the fact that God has actually placed you on this swim team for a reason? And that maybe what God was doing right there with her telling you no was he's trying to like shake you in a sense to say, this is your mission field. I have placed you here. Like, this is how I'm going to use you and help you grow more into who you are. And like, that was like an aha moment for me. And kind of what that ended up looking like was like, I tried to approach the conversations I had with my team, with my life with the team, as a way of like, how do I help them know the love of Jesus? And I wasn't always perfect with it, but it is what opened my eyes to this whole idea of like, church isn't just a Sunday thing.
Yeah.
It's our spiritual formation isn't just a Sunday thing, but
Yeah.
God calls us to follow him every single day. And every time we say yes to those moments, he's using that to help us grow.
Yep. I love that. And I love that by you taking quote unquote church with you, by you living out your identity and assuming like you are now a representative of the church.
Yeah.
You are inserting a countercultural way of thinking, way of approaching relationships, different perspective to those that might never, ever come into a church in the first place.
Yeah.
And so I just think like there's something so powerful about how you gave some examples. You even shared a story about someone that I think it was a baseball coach.
Or just a coach. Yeah.
Just
Tom,
a coach?
Yeah.
Yeah. And how he views his team, the team that he coaches, as his mission field.
Yeah.
To care so much more about who the players are becoming rather than how they're performing.
And I think, being in my seat too with working with students, we have students who are at high schools right now who are leading Christian clubs. And it is such like
Dude,
an
that's
awesome thing for me to get to see of them saying, I want to lead this stuff with my peers. And our church, we have a number of people going through cohorts, and we're doing a similar thing with the student ministry called dive groups that are like kind of an 8-week class. And a focus of it is helping them learn more about like, what does it mean to follow Jesus, the kingdom qualities that Phil talked about last week, but then with kind of the mindset of how do I now take this and help my friends discover this in their lives as well. And it's been such a joy to get to watch them grow and to begin to think about these things and apply it to their life that, it's just exciting to get to be a part of that.
Yeah. So, Brad, I kind of have a harder question for you.
Yeah.
Some people in my life, I'm like, oh, I'm so excited because I know that what I say about the church or about how I will express love or something else to them will just go over super well. And then there's people in my life where I'm like, I don't know if I'm really supposed to be called to love this person, even though I am. How can I help still be a formational, like how can I be that countercultural presence to those that are hard to love in my life? What does that look like?
Yes. I mean, I think we all struggle with that. There are people who I think get under everybody's skin in some way, and it's for different reasons. Like maybe it's the person who disagrees with me politically,
right.
As if people disagree about things. I heard that might be true, or like somebody who just has habits that are frustrating. Yeah.
Sorry, one of the ways that I feel like, as I've been thinking about what it means to be countercultural, it seems like today, and we've talked about this quite a lot over the past year, is just how like. It just seems like the world's in teams right now. I'm team left or right. I'm team this or that. I'm team this. And there's no room in the middle for anything else.
Yeah.
And so, trying to blur those lines a bit or to be able to be a representative of nuanced conversation and love seems like a lost art form almost.
It is. I think it's challenging. And I think the first step always has to be we need to start praying for that person.
I love that.
And the reason being is I've found that when you're praying for somebody, it's hard to be mad at them. Or maybe you're mad at them for a time. But like if you truly are praying for God to do a work in their life and your desire is for their good, it's hard to continue to let that bitterness kind of boil up, or else God's gonna, like, Jesus is gonna check you on it, and eventually He'll help it heal. But I found that you always want to start with praying, and if I've had people like that in my life, it's like, how am I praying for them? And slowly I've noticed God will soften my heart towards them, and it doesn't mean that all the problems will be gone, but it at least allows me to approach conversations a little bit differently in order to love them a little better than maybe I would have last time. And understanding that changing somebody's heart is never our responsibility, that the Holy Spirit's working in them too, and just staying faithful to what God has called us to do. There's a story that I didn't put in. I'm seeing if I have it in my notes. I might not, but it was from one of John Tyson's books, and I can't remember the name of the people who it was about, but it was an example, I think, from the 17th century of some people who really started to change a culture, but it was one person who felt convicted because his relationships with these other people in their community, it was very poor, and he one day approached them and said, hey, can we start praying together? And they didn't like him either, but they both agreed, yes, we'll be praying together. And in that process, God opened their eyes to how their lives were not reflecting his kingdom, and it helped bridge their relationships together.
Wow.
And then they started to just form this whole community that started to transform the larger community that they were a part of. And I think that's just a kind of a great example of how when we trust God with just whatever maybe is on our mind or what is before us, and we just ask, hey, God, work in me and help me take that next step. Last week, Phil talked about being the hands a little bit and how sometimes
Those
we
tiny
fail to do
hands.
that. But it's like,
Yep.
no, really the best way to grow, the best way to connect with church, for the church to be the church, is if you actually invest in the church. Because if you just show up, it's probably not going to make that big of a difference. But if when you're listening to that sermon and God puts somebody on your mind and then you actually follow up with that conversation, God will use that to help you grow, and it'll help our community grow together as well.
And when you say invest in the church, I'm thinking of people serving. I'm thinking of people giving their time. I'm thinking of people joining some of the groups or attending things like Discover Menlo or Menlo Next, or just ways that hopefully these things aren't just to make you feel more comfortable when you're here, but for people to start living out their faith, and for it to be top of mind for people to carry it into the other 167 hours of their week. And so I'm curious, Brett. I asked Rochelle this last week. As I'm thinking through formation, can you win at formation? Is it an eternal process? Is it something that like as you've thought through and spent some time, like, I'm a very goal-oriented person.
Yes, yeah.
It's hard
Yeah.
to measure my formation. And I want to be like, well, I feel like I'm more formed this year rather than last year.
Yeah.
How can people think through what formation is, maybe the process in which we all are going through, and what are some helpful things maybe in your life, or things of people that you know that are good markers or things of being more formed? I don't know.
Yeah, no, as you're saying, I'm trying to think of what is the rating scale of like, who are the people we're thinking about, of like, who's the gold standard? Jesus, obviously. I mean, come on.
exactly.
Yeah, Jesus is the gold standard.
Yeah.
I don't think we can ever be fully formed this side of heaven.
Yeah.
I think that's part of it. And the more I notice with myself of like, sure, maybe there's a place in my life where all of a sudden I'm becoming more patient. If I then be like, okay, I've made it here, chances are 6 months later, I'm falling right back.
Yeah.
And it's like, it's that constant journey. I think, Rochelle talked about it last week with lifting weights, of like, it's a constant thing. And if you take a step back, man, like the getting back there is so much harder. But I think, what was that question again? No, it's a constant journey.
Yep.
I think for myself, how have I been thinking about it? Like, in a lot of ways, it's recognizing where this place is where you need to grow and praying to God about that. Like, I'll use this story. Like, as a kid, I was a very angry kid.
Really?
And not on the outside. Like, I'm really good at putting on a mask and just being like, oh, yeah, I'm really kind. Oh, but like inside, it'll bubble up. And like as a kid, like I was a troublemaker in our family. And I would fight at home so much. And my parents would always say like, okay, well, we're going to pray that God takes away that anger. And so every single night they had me pray about it. And I will tell you, it worked. Like, I still will get angry. Like, I get really riled up when it happens. It takes an extreme thing to do it. But like, I saw or experienced God taking that away from me. But it was just like this long process of recognizing where are those gaps in your life that you really need God's Spirit to help you through it, and bring that to Him constantly. Like, people always say, like, don't pray for patience, because if you do, God's gonna make you wait. And I think there is sometimes some truth to that. Is if we are never in those places where we have to actually practice what it is that we feel like God's calling us to do, we're never gonna actually grow. And so, yeah, for me, it's recognizing what are those places, having somebody in my life to hold me accountable, like Taylor, my wife. Yeah, that's an accountability thing. I think that's the church part too, like you mentioned earlier, of it's not just showing up. Like, you could have life groups, and you could very well have a life group that you are just a community, that Jesus doesn't play any role in that. It's just a friend group who gets together. But I think what's unique about a church life group is hopefully you are rooted in who Jesus is calling us to be. That yes, you're checking in on life, but you're also talking about how is that conversation you're having at work. How is your relationship with Jesus shaping that, or the way you show up or approach those things. And so that's where community is really helpful in helping you grow in that area. Like, I guess an example of this, and I realize I'm going on tangents, is at the beginning of COVID, or actually right before COVID, and this goes back to formation books in some ways that you mentioned earlier. My life group, we were reading Ruthless Elimination of Hurry by John Mark Comer, and great book.
Really
I think
good
it was mentioned a lot in the series. So a book of his that I used a lot in my talk was Live No Lies,
Yeah,
also
that's a
a
good one
great
too.
book. But we had this moment right before the world shut down where we're reading it, and I think somebody said, man, if only the world would shut down, we'd be able to apply this book. And so, sure enough, the world shut down. And we get back together like 2 months later or something, and we realize we need to pick back up the book. And what we discovered is that everybody filled their time in a new way.
Wow.
Even though the
Yeah.
world shut down. And for us, it was kind of like that light bulb moment of, actually, this problem isn't out there. This problem is in here.
Dude, that's
and
good.
as a group, getting to talk about that together. And so that's where, I mean, like having a group that is willing to share with one another is, and challenge one another is so essential to our spiritual formation.
That's great. Because we talked a little bit about the community aspect of it last week.
Yeah.
But the aspect to go a little bit deeper of, it's not just about the community, it's about what kind of community that you have, what questions you're asking, how honest and vulnerable you are with that community, and how willing you are to invite people into the parts of you that need to be formed. Ooh, that's tough.
Yeah.
That's real tough.
I'm not good with that. I'm a very
skill,
personal
for sure.
person.
Yeah.
And so, it is very hard for me to share that with anybody.
Yeah.
I even got kicked out of a life group when I was in college because I guess I shouldn't say I got kicked out of a life group. But it was a college life group led by some people, and our group had a very firm talking to because the person's like, some of you never even talk. And then afterwards, one of the guys in the group goes, how'd it feel to know that he was calling you out? I was like, yeah, that was great. I think the last time I went to that group.
Yeah.
But that's just, I have a hard time doing that. But when I feel like I do know people and do trust people, that's when it's like, yes. But it takes work to get there.
It does. It does. Good. And Brett, is formation just for adults? Is it
No.
just for people that are lifelong Christians that want to be better?
Yeah.
So you say no immediately, which I'm glad you did.
Yeah.
How can we help instill this idea that no matter where anyone along, where, like you said, you worked with people 0 to 18.
Yeah.
And then you're talking to everyone this past weekend, 0 to, 100 probably.
Could be. Yeah.
No matter where people are on this journey, we're still all called to be formed.
Yeah.
And so what's some work that y'all are doing in Next Gen that are helping live this idea out here? And then how can we as a broader community in some of the spaces that we have with people with some of our, youth that aren't necessarily here on Sunday, what can we look like, and how can we bring this idea to those that are nieces, nephews, people that we're coaching, stuff like that?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think formation can happen at any age, like we're saying, and it's going to look different at any age. Like how you talk about these sorts of things to a 2-year-old is going to look a lot different than an 8-year-old and a 13-year-old or a college student. And in like our next gen spaces, we do try to look at our curriculum based on like what is the age and stage of the kids.
Yeah.
And so the curriculum that we use, Orange Curriculum, like one of their things that they've focused on a lot is the phases, and they've created books actually to help parents that help
great.
walk through each phase of how do you talk about these things at this age. And so, which is a really cool thing. I also think there's an element, like I mentioned in my talk, my parents and kind of what they did in our household. And I think that was very formative for me in helping me follow Jesus. And it wasn't like we were doing seminary classes. Like I was still like the church, like, I don't mean the kid the know-it-all who, I mean,
Could have guessed.
Yeah. I mean, my teachers probably didn't like me. But they kept us into church. But going back to like what does this look like in student ministry and kids ministry? We try to talk about Jesus in a way that they will understand, like simplify it in some ways, but then also ask, what does this look like to apply it to your life? Because again, like we're talking about, we don't want to just know all the facts. We want to help them live this out, because when we live it out is when I think God works in us in a lot of ways. There are some great books out there for families. Like one book is called Habits of the Household. I'm blanking on the author's name right now, but that is one that I read recently that he kind of walks through different stages of your day and helps parents think about how can you bring conversations about who God is into those moments, or create rhythms and routines in your household. I plug the parenting event coming up where we're talking about that. Being a spiritually vibrant household. And the book, Jason Brogie's coming out for it, and he works with Lutheran Hour Ministries, and was part of a group that did research with Barna looking at what are spiritually vibrant homes. And so he's going to be talking about, here's data that we have found that seems to suggest when you start applying these sorts of things, it's not like, man, yeah, your kids are going to be the most like God following, God honoring, like they've reached full spiritual formation, but it's like, how do we create a culture in our household for the Spirit of God to move and to work in their lives? And I'm really looking forward to it. Like Jason's a great guy, and so it'll be a good conversation, and I hope that it's very practical. For it as well. And then, with the formation, as students get older, like let's say as kids get older, how we're thinking as a church is like when a student gets into high school, we now want to start equipping them to be ready to own their faith outside of high school graduation, because there are so many statistics around when students graduate high school, they also graduate from their faith. And some of the sticking points to where or things that they've noticed has helped students stay connected to the faith is, one, they're connected to the larger body of Christ, and they are serving in the church, and they understand the church is more than just a service I go to during the week, but also helping them lead in spaces where they get to practice sharing their faith with kids or with students. Like we have so many students who serve on our Menlo Kids teams, and it is awesome getting to see them do that, and that they're investing in the next generation. I think we've had some kids classes, I can't remember at which campus, but where we had somebody who was the kids' Sunday school teacher of an adult leader, and then that adult leader serving alongside a student who was in their group, and now they're leading. So it's almost like 3 generations leading together. It's like, that's awesome. That's the church right there.
Awesome.
Those are some of the things we think about. And then alongside with our curriculum, we always send out conversation starters for parents, because a lot of it is just noticing where are those moments that could be fewer and far between, but where you can talk about what Jesus is doing with your kids, or helping them notice how God is at work around them. And the more you begin to be aware of something, the more God seems to be transforming our lives.
I love that. That even extends past kids too.
Absolutely. Yeah.
We also talked about signups. Speaking of stuff for kids, signups for this summer. What's going on with that?
Yeah, this summer we have Menlo Kids Summer Camp coming up, and we're having it at each of our 4 campuses, which we are so excited about. Last summer we had it just at our Menlo Park campus, and so we had everybody drive to it. But similar to what we were talking about in the talk, this weekend, is we are a multi-site church, so that we are actually influencing and being lights in each of the communities where we live.
So cool.
And so by having our Menlo Kids Summer Camp at each of the campuses, we're hoping to get to reach students from all of those surrounding campuses. And it's free, which is unbelievable. And that's like thanks to the generosity to Hope for Everyone at our church. Like we're able to provide that for people. And we already have 5 times as many people total than we did last year. That's all campuses combined, but it's just like unbelievable. And so we are so excited of what God's going to do through that. And with that, it's like the Menlo Kids Summer Camp is not just a thing for kids. Every year we have parents volunteering, we have adults volunteering, we have students volunteering. And so it really is an event for the entire church to surround the next generation and support the next generation as they learn about what life with Jesus is all about.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
Well, Brett, thanks so much for all the work that you're doing and your team's doing. We really appreciate your voice and your the way that you can uniquely blend together multi-generational like just how you can take concepts and make them applicable for someone that's 5 years old to someone that's 65. And so really appreciate that about you, and just the thought and the attention that you put into, everything that you do, whether that's speaking on Sunday or whether that's leading through a talk with students or how you go and visit a sports event for someone. Like, you're just so active in people's lives, and that is the mark of someone that has been formed by Jesus. So thanks so much, man. If you want to get involved with anything that Brett's talked about so far, you could reach out to him. You could text our team at 650-600-0402, and we'd love to get you plugged in to help make a difference with the next generation, or just get you started on your journey for spiritual formation.
Yeah.
So again, thanks everyone. Thanks for tuning in. Text us if you need anything. Have a great week, and we'll see you soon.
See y'all.